Hey, everybody. So I just wanted to share a little bit from my heart today. This past January, I'd shared on my channel that a dear, dear friend of ours had passed away after a brief battle with COVID. And so we have been grieving her loss and what that means in our life going forward. So, 2 weeks after Becca passed away, one of my sons came to me and showed me his knee, and he thought it looked a little bit weird. So I said, "Yeah, let's keep an eye on that." And as the day progressed, it seemed like his knee was feeling a little worse, getting a little stiff and puffy. By the end of the night, when I looked at it around 9 p.m., it was red and hot to the touch and really inflamed. So I rushed him to the ER. By the time we got to the ER, he couldn't walk anymore and needed a wheelchair. So I didn't really understand what was going on, but when they assessed his symptoms, they rushed him back into a room where they hooked him up to heart monitors. They did an unthinkable number of tests. And I had stepped outside of his room in the ER, and I noticed that they had put a big sign over his door saying that, this was, we were a high risk room, that there was caution to be taken in our room. And at some point, the doctor came in and looked at my son's hands and said, "You have COVID. Your hands look like you have COVID. I mean, we'll test, but I'm pretty sure that you do." And so, they ran all kinds of tests. He eventually came back, the doctor did, and told my son that he was positive for COVID. And then they took and they punctured his knee and they drained just a ton of fluid out of his knee. At this point, one doctor came in and told me that they were going to have to transfer us to a different hospital via ambulance. So we had checked into the ER around 10:30 in the evening, and this was about 5 in the morning. We hadn't gotten any sleep. He'd been having tests all night. It was just very tiring and emotional. And they ended up taking us by ambulance to a different hospital. And when we got to the hospital, they did his intake in the ER in that hospital, and then they immediately wheeled him up into a pre-op room. And I didn't even know what was going on. I was like, "Why are we in a pre-op room?" And they said, "Oh, you didn't know, like your son has to have surgery." So it turned out that he had a septic knee, and so they needed to clean out his knee. And that's a fairly standard procedure, but very serious in terms of needing to be done for his well-being and for his life. So when we were sitting in the OR, the anesthesiologist came in and she said, "All right, so we will be doing this and this and this. Oh, and by the way, because your son is COVID positive, I just need to let you be aware that there is a possibility that once intubated, we may never be able to extubate him." And I just stopped and I looked at her and I was like, "What? What did you say? How can you be telling me that for a fairly routine procedure, my young, otherwise healthy son might not make it out of this procedure?" And she said, "Well, the risk is really low that should happen, but I need to explain to you that that is a risk." So we talked about it a little while, and I was texting a doctor friend of mine, and she was like, "They have to tell you the risks. Um, the bigger thing is to get his knee cleaned out, and so try not to worry about what she said." And it was overwhelming because here I'm with my precious son who I love. And I just lost my dear friend who had been intubated with COVID. and didn't make it. And then the anesthesiologist telling me that because of his COVID and being intubated, it will be a higher risk situation for him. And my husband wasn't there because only one person could be there with him. And we were in this quarantined area. And I remember looking at my son and saying, "Do you understand what they're saying?" And he nodded yes, that he did. And we decided, all right, he needs to go in and have this surgery. And at that moment in time, I leaned over my son's bed and I held his hands. And together we prayed. And the prayer that we prayed was not thinking through his life, thinking about what he had done to this point, good or bad. We didn't think of sin that he needed to confess. We didn't think of anything but our gratefulness for Jesus. And together we bowed and had a moment of communion where we thanked Jesus for the cross and that he had secured my son's salvation, and that my son was already seated in the heavenly places with Christ, and that he was a co-heir with Christ and had all the heavenly blessings in Christ already, and that he was sealed with the Spirit, and that he has life eternal. And we thanked God that my son was in his hands and that we could trust him no matter what. And that was our prayer. I kissed him on his forehead, and they wheeled him away into the OR and brought me into an isolated room where I sat for a couple of hours by myself. And I did present my request before God that my son would come through the surgery and that he could be successfully extubated and healed. But I also spent a lot of my time in that moment continually casting my cares upon the Lord who cares for me, and walking by faith and thanking him for his promises in the cross, and his promises of who he is, and his promises of who my son and I and our family are because of what he's done for us and what he's secured for us. And that was how I got through those 2 hours alone waiting to hear from the surgeon. And the surgeon came to me and told me that the surgery was a success, and they hadn't extubated him yet, and that was the thing. So I had to wait a little bit longer, and then finally they came. They were able to successfully get him extubated, and I got to go into recovery and be with my son and thank the Lord that he came through the surgery. And at that point, he was admitted, and he was in the hospital for several days on IV antibiotics, and then spent a couple of months on oral antibiotics in the healing process. But the whole point of the story is that when we were in this crisis moment, the thing that brought us through it was faith in Jesus Christ, not looking to ourselves, but looking to things above, and being able to rest in the knowledge that Jesus is our all in all. He is our strength when we are weak. He is our treasure. And it was the thing that brought us through that moment and through those days. And it was a really sweet, precious time that we got to have just alone together, hanging out. We listened to sermons, and we prayed, and we talked, and we played video games, and we watched Marvel movies. I think they're Marvel movies or Avenger. I don't know. I don't know the difference between all the movies. But we watched movies and just enjoyed one another and rested together. But the rest that was the significant rest that we experienced was the rest that we had in the cross and in the gospel. And I just want to encourage you today that if you are facing something difficult, I know the pain. I know how hard it is to face the unknown, how hard it is to walk through things with people that you love, and sometimes you lose them. And sometimes they come through. But no matter the outcome of what happens on this earth, we can rest in God's incredible mercy toward us, and that while we were yet sinners, Christ died for us. And that he has secured everything for us, that he is totally trustworthy, and that all we do is respond to this free gift of grace that he lavishes and pours over us by believing his word, by believing his son. And it is such a joy and a gift to be part of his body and to be able to walk in his truth and in his word and in his ways and in his love, and to be able to trust him. So hopefully this encourages somebody today. God bless you. May Jesus bless and keep you.